Hello, my name's Cliff Stevenson and I'm the Helpful Economist. This time we're looking at the role of the state in the economy and we're asking the question, what kind of capitalism do we want? These questions are being prompted by recent press stories in relation to the bailout of SVB Bank in the US. Similarly, some people have criticised the level of government intervention on the environment. Just this week, the Financial Times ran such a story in relation to the EU Net Zero Industry Act. Now, an introductory economics lecture will often include a discussion on the spectrum of market orientations from a purely planned economy to one totally organised around the free market, and it will attempt to show where different countries sit on this spectrum. Of course, no countries exist at either extreme. In fact, all economic systems are mixed economies to different degrees. We also see terms such as communism and neoliberalism to describe systems towards the extremes. Of course, this is indicative only. It's not supposed to be a precise categorization. In the 1980s, Reaganomics and Thatcherism were heavily free market. And last year in the UK we had the ill-fated Trussonomics, which was also an attempt to shift back in that direction. The current UK government, the UK Labour Party, and perhaps even the current US administration, more or less all see more of a role for the state in the economy, i.e. more mixed than Thatcherism. Of course, COVID saw very significant intervention in the economy, and we're still in a period post that, which has definitely had an impact. We can also note that the previous Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, set out an economic ideology with much more of a role for the state in the economy. Again, this is indicative only, but it's helpful in understanding where the different economic ideologies are on the spectrum. We can take a look at the economic arguments relating to the level of state intervention. As is often the case with economics, nothing is black and white, and there are arguments on both sides. Arguments against state intervention include the fact that it distorts normal market signals. According to this view, the invisible hand knows better than the bureaucrats. A second argument is that it's costly and resulting higher taxes stifle the economy, ultimately affecting growth and jobs. In terms of environmental regulation, some would argue that imposing such costs on industry stifles the very innovation that will produce the technology to solve environmental problems. In the case of banking, the state stepping in creates moral hazard, i.e. changes the risk incentives, because banks know that they don't have to face the consequences if they make a mistake. This view would say that it's important to allow banks to go bust. As an example of a more free market view, we can identify the 2012 book Britannia Unchained. This was written by a small group of UK free market conservative politicians, including Liz Truss. The book talks of symptoms of a swollen, cosseting state, with risk aversion embedded as a central principle of government. It also argues that it's the freedom to take risks, fail and try again that underpins capitalism. According to this free market view, there'll always be winners and losers, and the state doesn't need to help the losers, which will give them the incentive to find work or to be entrepreneurial. To some, such views are hard-hearted and ruthless, but advocates of this view would say that allowing the economy to run in the most efficient way is the best way of helping everyone in the longer term. The fact that there are winners and losers, the argument would go, is why it works. Others would argue for the critical role of state intervention. Some such arguments would include market failure, where the market doesn't take account of externalities due to short-term profit objectives. A good example is negative external impact on the environment. In terms of banking, bank failure may destabilise the whole economy, so the state has a role in stabilising excessive economic fluctuations. In the case of banking, the idea of central banks being the lender of the last resort is well established, but there are questions around the degree of intervention, as in the SVB case. A final argument around state intervention relates to social objectives, for example in relation to income and opportunity inequality. To what extent should government help the losers in a winner-takes-all system? A recent paper published by the World Economic Forum sets out some interesting ideas which brings a new dimension to the debate. The paper claims that the debate about market versus the state was a false dichotomy. It also claims that a bold state can unleash the full power of markets. And finally, it calls governments an investor of the first resort, using all the tools they have to create the conditions to grow niches of innovation. One of the economists involved in this work is Mariana Mazzucato. In her book, The Entrepreneurial State, she sets out some of these ideas. She points out that if the rest of the world want to emulate the US model, they should do as the US did, not as they say they did. She points out how the Google algorithm was initially funded by the US National Science Foundation. She also highlighted the fact that Apple popularized technologies that were developed by the government, including GPS navigation, touchscreen technology, and smartphone voice recognition. If this is true, it suggests that the US is perhaps more of a mixed economy than is suggested by the typical introductory economics lecture graphic. In conclusion, I think this debate is necessary because I feel there's an economic ambiguity and vacuum in policy making. In the UK, for example, many politicians seem to be doing what they think is popular. We hear a lot of talk of the British people want. But I think that democracy requires clarity around economic models and ideologies. To some extent, the debate is about brutal but potentially super efficient capitalism versus caring, compassionate capitalism. There is an argument, however, that the debate needs to be broadened into the role of government in innovation. So, what kind of capitalism do you want? I hope you found this information useful. I'm Cliff Stevenson. I'm the Helpful Economist. See you next time.